Charlie Cross Morrison made three choices that sealed his fate. The first, joining the Ku Klux Klan in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, 1943. He was 19, angry at the world, eager to blame someone. The Klan handed him clarity, twisted, vile, dangerous clarity. The second, murdering state trooper Daniel Richardson near Valdosta, Georgia, August 1951. Charlie had been smuggling booze, got pulled over, panicked, and fired 2 shots into the officer's chest. They got him 3 days later. The judge sentenced him to die in Georgia's electric chair. At 27, time was running out. But it was his third mistake, the one he made with fire already blazing under his feet, and did everything fast. February 11, 1952. Escaped convict. 6 days into a desperate run. Armed. Frazzled. Charlie needed quick cash, so he walked into a high-end boutique in Harlem, saw a poised black woman inside and thought this was going to be simple. He raised his gun and snarled, "Empty the register or I'll empty your head." But the woman didn't flinch. She looked at him serene, like she pitied him. Then said 5 simple words that should have made him turn and run. "You just made a terrible mistake. Her name was Mai Johnson." And in 4 hours and 23 minutes her husband would step through that boutique door carrying a straight razor and message. A message Charlie Morrison would never forget. When you lay a hand on the Queen of Harlem, consequences arrive sharp, fast, and unforgettable. The newspapers called it self-defense. Harlem called it something deeper, justice. Charlie Morrison didn't call it anything at all. February 11, 1952, 10:23 a.m. Charlie had been free for just 6 days. He broke out while being transferred between prisons, leaping from a moving bus after a fight erupted on board and escape set in motion by chaos. 3 inmates fled that day. 2 were captured within 12 hours. Charlie Morrison made it all the way to New York on nothing but panic and fumes, $7 to his name, a stolen guard's jacket, and a brutal determination to disappear. No plan, no map, just run, north, fast. He rode freight trains, slept in rail yards and barns wherever the shadows agreed to hide him. 6 days of stealing food, guzzling cheap whiskey, just to silence the shakes. Constant hunger, trembling hands, paranoia chewing at the edges of his brain. He didn't know New York, had never left the South. When he stumbled out of Penn Station on February 10th, he was nothing more than a ghost in rags, desperate, gasping, unfamiliar with everything around him. The city smothered his senses. The noise, the volume, the mountains of concrete rising into the sky, felt like a fever dream. He had one thought: steal a few $100, enough to vanish into Canada. Charlie figured $500 would buy him a new name, new life, and maybe even forgiveness. That night, he curled up in a subway station, sick and twitching with withdrawal, praying morning would bring him salvation. What it brought was his biggest blunder. He got lost. Planned on finding Midtown but ended up on a subway line he couldn't decipher. When he saw 125th Street, the name felt significant, like opportunity. He got off, wandered into Harlem, and saw something that chilled him to his bones. Every single face he passed was black. Signs on the stores, music from shops, people on the street. It was a world he didn't recognize, and his shallow, poisoned beliefs told him this place wasn't safe. His mind screamed, "Get out now." But then a dress shop, beautiful display, elegant mannequins, a meticulously kept storefront. In Charlie's poisoned imagination, this meant money. Here's the lie he bought into after 9 years with the Klan. Black-owned meant weak, black women meant vulnerable. And this was an easy score. What Charlie Morrison couldn't see coming was that he'd just wandered into the heart of a neighborhood that wouldn't let him leave unchanged. Mai Johnson was 41 in 1952, married to Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson for 13 years. She'd left North Carolina for New York as part of the Great Migration, came to Harlem, stitched clothes, and by 1948 opened her own boutique with seed money from her husband. That store wasn't just where she worked. It was her domain, her declaration of independence. It was the one place in Harlem where she wasn't Bumpy's wife, was Mrs. Mai Johnson, sharp, confident, respected. That morning the shop was still quiet. Her assistant hadn't arrived. The early customers wouldn't trickle in until around 11. Mai was in the back room reviewing inventory, carefully jotting numbers in her ledger, Teddy handwriting of a woman who'd taught herself to read as an adult. Then she heard the doorbell, looked up expecting her co-worker. Instead, Darlie, Z stolen jacket, wild eyes, unsteady body. His hand twitched beneath his coat. Mai froze for one heartbeat, not out of fear, but calculation.
After 13 years married to Harlem's most feared man, she could recognize when danger walked through the door, and what it wanted. Charlie stepped forward, eyes locking on Mai, sizing her up like prey. He saw a well-dressed black woman alone in the back of the store. To him, she looked vulnerable. Easy, he reached into his coat, pulled out an old Colt M1911 pistol stolen from a surplus store in Philadelphia a few days earlier. The thing was beat up, rusty, left over from the war. He didn't care. It looked scary, and to Charlie, that was enough. His hand was trembling, alcohol withdrawal, adrenaline, fear, but he aimed anyway. Empty the register now, he barked. Don't make me ask again. He expected panic. Screaming. Compliance. Instead, Mai didn't flinch. Didn't move a single muscle. Just stared at him like she'd seen this movie before, like she already knew the ending. And the way she studied him, it wasn't terror. It was pity. You're not from here, she said, voice calm and almost conversational. Charlie's nerves cracked. I said get the damn money, he shouted, hand tightening on the gun. Mai still didn't budge, still watching him, still composed. I heard you, she replied coolly. I'm just trying to figure something out. You're lost, aren't you? You have no idea where you are. Anger surged through Charlie. He took a step closer. I know exactly where I am. Mai cut him off mid-sentence. No, you're in Harlem. You're standing on Lenox Avenue, and you just walked into my shop. You pulled a gun on me. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Do you even know who I am? Charlie blinked. Confused. Unimpressed. I don't care who. My name is Bumpy Johnson. She let it land. Ring any bells. It didn't. How could it? He'd spent the last few months locked away in prison, running moonshine before that. Charlie Morrison didn't know Harlem. He didn't know the names that carried weight here. And he had no clue that the woman standing in front of him was a pillar in the very heart of the neighborhood he'd just wandered into. I don't care what your name is, he snapped. Get the money, or I swear to God. Then Mai said those 5 words again. This time colder, clearer. You just made a terrible mistake. She didn't yell, didn't raise her voice. She said it like she was pointing out the weather, like Charlie had spilled coffee on a white rug. Unfortunate, but not her problem to fix. He laughed, but it was hollow, jittery. The sound of a man quickly losing control. Yeah? What kind of mistake? Mai studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she calmly walked past him, not in fear, not rushing. Walking, as if he wasn't even a threat. She flipped the open sign to close, turned the lock, pulled the shade down over the storefront window. Click. Thunk. Whisper. Charlie watched her, confused. What are you doing? He asked. Buying you time, she said quietly. A few hours at least. After that, we'll see. Then she walked to the phone behind the counter, dialed slowly. Charlie watched her in disbelief, pistol still raised, frozen in indecision. He should have stopped her. Could have. But he was too thrown off by her confidence, her quiet control. My needs watering. That's all she said into the receiver. Then she hung up and turned back to him. Charlie's voice edged toward panic. Who did you just call? Small's Paradise. A club about 6 blocks from here. I left a message for my husband. Charlie froze. Your husband? His voice cracked. Who? Ellsworth Johnson, Mai replied. But everyone around here just calls him Bumpy. The name meant nothing to Charlie. He had no idea who Bumpy Johnson was, no idea that he had just held a gun to the wife of the man who ran this neighborhood, not quietly, not secretly. Openly, respectfully, with a code and a crown that no outsider could touch. In every corner of Harlem there were 3 rules. Rule 1, steal from Bumpy's people. Rule 2, don't test his territory. Rule 3, never ever put your hands on his wife. Charlie had just broken all 3. I don't care who your husband is, Charlie snarled, puffing up what little bravado he had left. He comes through that door, I'll shoot him too. Now get the money. Mai didn't blink. Or what? You shoot me? She asked, her voice cool and unshaken. Then what? You think you walk out of here after that? You think Harlem will let you? Frustrated, Charlie grabbed her arm. Listen, lady, he hissed. I've killed before. I can do it again. Your husband, whoever he is, he's just another. And that's when it happened. Sirens. Charlie's head snapped toward the front window. Through a narrow slit in the shade, he saw flashing lights, police cruisers pulling up, doors opening, officers spreading out, drawing weapons, taking positions. You called the cops. Charlie's voice rose, panic creeping in. No, Mai said evenly. Somebody saw you walk in here with a gun. Harlem looks out for its own. And what happened next may as well have been folklore, a story told in whispers and passed down like scripture. Over the next 4 hours, the sidewalk outside became a wall of watchers. By noon, nearly 200 people stood on Lenox Avenue shoulder to shoulder, watching, waiting, not rioting, not yelling, just standing, present. Unmoving, there were mothers, grandfathers, store owners who closed early, young men fresh off the job. They filled the street, held the line. When police tried to move them, they didn't flinch. "Folks, you need to clear the area," one sergeant shouted. "This is an active hostage situation." An older woman in a church hat, holding a Bible like a shield, looked at him with pity. "We're not interfering, officer," she said. "We're witnessing. This is our neighborhood," a butcher barked from the second row. "That's Mrs. Johnson in there. And we ain't leaving until she's safe." More officers arrived, the perimeter tightened. Police Captain William Henderson showed up, took one look at the crowd, and understood exactly what kind of storm he had walked into. This wasn't a normal hostage scene. This couldn't be handled the usual way. You couldn't arrest 200 witnesses, you couldn't shove Harlem off its own streets, and Henderson knew the stakes. He'd been on Bumpy Johnson's payroll for years. Not much, just enough to keep things smooth. To tip Bumpy off before a raid, to let certain things slide. Because Henderson understood something most didn't. With Bumpy running Harlem, things stayed orderly. Less bloodshed, less chaos. Bumpy Johnson was chaos contained. But today, this wasn't contained, this was precarious. Inside the boutique, Charlie was unraveling. His tough guy mask was slipping fast. The woman he'd expected to sob or plead just kept standing there, calm, steady. It was maddening, like she already knew how this would end and was just waiting for him to figure it out. Around 2 p.m., Charlie finally snapped. "Why aren't you scared?" he asked, almost pleading. I looked at him evenly, because no matter what you do, this ends the same way. The only question is whether you're smart enough to surrender before my husband gets here. You keep saying that name, I don't give a damn who, you should. And for the first time, her voice dropped cold. Bumpy Johnson is the most powerful man in Harlem. He's killed over less. You grabbed me, pulled a gun on me, in Harlem, on his street. She took a breath, delivered it slow. You crossed a line, Charlie, and you can't walk back. Charlie, she said softly, that's your name, right? That's what the negotiator told me. Charlie Morrison, ex-Klan, escaped death row in Georgia after killing a state trooper. Charlie's eyes widened. How do you, he told me, thought it would help me understand who I was dealing with. Her voice wasn't angry, it was measured, almost sad. Charlie, you're already dead. Georgia wants to fry you. You've got what, 3 months maybe? So right now you think you've got nothing to lose. Charlie didn't speak. He gritted his teeth, jaw clenched. But that's where you're wrong, Mike continued. There are all kinds of ways to die. Georgia's electric chair, that's quick. 2,000 volts, done in seconds. She paused. But my husband, he's not quick. Charlie stared at her. He's patient, and if you put one more finger on me, he will make sure your final hours are so painful, so drawn out, that you'll wish Georgia got to you first. You're bluffing, am I? She asked, locking eyes with him. Do you really want to find out? At 3:42 p.m., the phone on the shop's counter rang. Charlie jumped, a full-body flinch. Don't answer that, it kept ringing. That's probably the negotiator, Mai said calmly. Pick it up, see what they have to say. Gun still trembling, Charlie reached with his free hand and lifted the receiver. Morrison, a gruff yet urgent voice said. This is Captain Henderson. How's Mrs. Johnson? She's alive, Charlie muttered hoarsely. She stays that way if I get what I want. And what, exactly, is that? Henderson asked. A car, passage to Canada, or she dies. There was silence. Then Henderson's voice returned lower now. Almost a whisper. Morrison, you need to let her go. Now, not because of me. Because her husband just arrived. Charlie felt the blood in his veins turn cold. What? He rasped. Bumpy Johnson, Henderson said. He's outside. In the street. And Morrison, there was a pause, long, deliberate. I've worked Harlem for 15 years. I've seen what this man does to people who cross him. You're already on death row. Don't make these your worst days. Let her go. Surrender. At least that way, Georgia gets to you first. You're bluffing, Charlie whispered. Look out the window, Henderson said. Charlie still had the gun pressed to Mai's head as he crept toward the shade, peeled it open just enough to see. The crowd, 200 deep, had parted. A path was now clear between the officers and the boutique. And walking through that path slow and steady like he owned the sidewalk was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. He was 45. Not tall, not broad, but he moved like gravity respected him, like the street belonged to his footsteps. He wore a charcoal suit fitted to perfection. A fedora low over his brow, shoes shined to a mirror polish. To a stranger, he could look like a businessman on the way to a lunch meeting until you saw his face. Charlie had seen that expression before. In prison. On killers. Eyes that had stared death down so many times it no longer made them blink. Cold. Emotionless. The gaze of a shark. Bumpy stopped 10 feet from the door. He reached inside his jacket slowly. Guns cocked from the direction of the police, but Bumpy didn't pull a weapon. He pulled something smaller, sharper. An old straight razor, the kind that could shave or slice. With one flick of his wrist, he opened the razor clean. That sound metal on metal cut through the air like thunder in a funeral procession. Then Bumpy turned to Henderson. Bumpy's voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. "Captain," he said, eyes locked on Henderson, "I'm going through that door in 2 minutes." His tone was almost polite. "What happens next? You don't want your officers to witness. You don't want them filing reports. You don't want court testimony. Mr. Johnson," Henderson began carefully, "this is a police scene. I can't just—" "You can," Bumpy interrupted, still razor calm. "You can order your men to hold the perimeter, keep them back. And if they hear anything inside this building," he paused, "they wait 30 seconds before moving. That's all I need, 30 seconds. Johnson, if I let you, mind if you just—" "I'm not asking," Bumpy said quietly, deliberately. "I'm telling you what's going to happen." Then silence wrapped the conversation like a cloak. Henderson glanced at the crowd, 200 people unmoving watching. Then he looked at Bumpy, measured the situation with something beyond law-harval instinct. "Officers," Henderson finally barked, "fall back to the end of the block. Maintain distance. Do not approach unless I give the order. Captain, we can't just—" "That's an order." The officers obeyed, slowly. Step by step, they withdrew until they were just far enough to avoid seeing what was about to happen. Close enough for plausible deniability, a line of sight they could officially not confirm. But the crowd didn't move, they stayed right there, still. Silent. Bumpy walked up to the shop door, turned the handle. Locked. He stepped back, called toward the window. "Morrison," he said, like he was offering a choice of coffee. "You've got 2 paths here. One, you let my wife walk out. Not a scratch on her. Do that, I let Henderson take you back to Georgia. Clean, quick. You die in that chair before summer. 2, he paused, then added just enough venom to kill. I come in there. And before Georgia gets their chance, spend 3 days in a Harlem hospital wishing you'd chosen option 1. Inside the dress shop, Charlie was unraveling. His hands shook. The barrel of the gun trembled. "He's bluffing," he whispered to Mai. She didn't even turn her head. "He's not bluffing," she replied softly. "And Charlie, listen to me, you're a dead man either way." Her eyes found his. They were calm, resolute. "Georgia will kill you whether you give up now or in a week. But the only question left is what you make of the time in between." Charlie looked down at the gun, then at Mai, then back at the door. "I can't go back," he breathed, voice cracking like glass under weight. "That chair," terror lived under those words. Mai answered gently, "You're going back either way. But you can go back in one piece. That's your choice." Outside, Bumpy stopped waiting. He took 3 steps back, then kicked the door just beside the lock. Boom. The frame didn't just break, surrendered. Wood exploded. The lock tore free. Charlie spun toward the sound, arm flying up with the gun. Too slow. Bumpy was already inside, razor out, moving like thunder on silk. Charlie screamed. "No!" He pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. The Colt 1911 old, rusted, filthy, jammed, slide stuck. Cartridge wedged hard in the ejection port. Charlie's salvation evaporated in a second flat. He turned the gun sideways, trying to clear it, panic flooding in. And that second, that fraction of a heartbeat, is all Bumpy needed. Bumpy was on him in 2 strides. His left hand lashed out, fast and precise, clamping down on Charlie's wrist, one holding the useless gun. Then twist. Bone and tendons screamed. Charlie howled. The pistol clattered to the floor, dead weight. Bumpy's right hand, razor still open, rose like lightning. But this wasn't wild violence. It was precision. In a fluid, practiced arc, Bumpy dragged the blade across Charlie's neck, not deep enough to kill, but deep enough that it burned fire into flesh. From just below the left jaw, clean across to the right, around 2 inches lower than the jugular, not a death blow. A message.
Blood poured. Charlie's hands flew up, desperate to stop the bleeding. Warm, wet, fast. His body pressed back against the wall, legs buckling, strength fleeing. "That's for putting your hands on my wife," Bumpy said quietly. No rage, no shouting, no show. Just the cold, even tone of a man explaining exactly how math works to someone who failed to study. Charlie fell to the floor, clutching his throat. Crimson soaked his collar, his hands, the rug. He gasped, panicked, wide-eyed. Bumpy, unfazed, stepped back. Wiped the razor blade on Charlie's stolen prison jacket. Once, then folded it closed with a snap and slipped it back inside his coat. He turned to Mai. "You okay?" She nodded, eyes steady. "I'm fine." Bumpy turned back toward Charlie, who had slumped down to the ground. Sitting now, shaking, both hands clamped over the wound, eyes locked on Bumpy like a wounded animal waiting for the final blow. "Morrison," Bumpy said, voice still low. "Look at me." Charlie looked up, hands still soaked red. "You came to Harlem thinking it'd be easy. Thought you were the wolf, and we were sheep. You thought the clan made you powerful." Bumpy continued, crouching until he was eye to eye with Charlie. "You thought that gun made you important. That fear would be enough." He shook his head slowly. "You were wrong." He pointed at the slice across Charlie's throat, bleeding through clenched hands. "That scar? That's the lesson. That's what you leave here with. However many days you've got left, that cut reminds you what kind of man you really are." Bumpy stood, turned toward the front door. "Captain Henderson." He called it out evenly. "Morrison's ready. He needs medical. Got a cut on his throat, superficial, but it's bleeding. He'll make it back to Georgia." Seconds later, Henderson appeared in the torn doorway. 2 officers behind him, weapons lowered but alert. They looked at Charlie on the floor, bloody, broken, eyes wild, then at Bumpy's suit, flawless, expression unreadable. Then at the corner where the pistol lay, jammed and useless. Henderson's eyes noticed something else, brass letter opener on the counter, shaped like a dagger, always there, used for mail. "What happened here, Mr. Johnson?" Bumpy didn't hesitate. "Morrison tried to attack my wife with that letter opener," he said calmly, pointing. "I got to him first, protected her. It got rough." Henderson looked at the opener, then the razor-thin cut across Morrison's throat. It wasn't a believable story. Everyone knew it, but it was clean. Contained. No one had to report what actually happened. "I see," Henderson said finally. "You're certain that's how it occurred?" "Absolutely certain." He turned to Mai. "Mrs. Johnson, can you confirm that without missing a beat?" She nodded. "That's what happened, Captain." He grabbed the opener. "My husband stopped him. Thank God he came when he did." Henderson gave a slow, knowing nod. "All right, that's the report, officers," Henderson said, turning to his men. "You heard them. Morrison attacked Mrs. Johnson with a weapon. Mr. Johnson intervened to protect her. Get him to Harlem Hospital. Have the docs patch him up." He added almost as an afterthought, "Then call Georgia State Prison. They've got a death row inmate to reclaim." The 2 officers moved in, grabbed Charlie under each arm, and hauled him up. He was crying now, from the pain, from the fear, from realizing that the only man who'd shown him mercy was the one with every reason not to. As they dragged him past, Bumpy leaned slightly forward and spoke one last time, soft, almost like a whisper, but sharp enough to stay lodged in Charlie's brain. "Morrison, you've got maybe 3 months before Georgia straps you to that chair." His voice was low, professional, "and every day until they do, when you look in the mirror and see that scar, you remember what Harlem taught you. You remember hate doesn't make you strong. That gun you had, it didn't protect you. What protected you was me choosing not to kill you. You remember that day, the day a black man in a gray suit moved faster than you could blink, and taught you the truth the clan never warned you about." Charlie was pulled into the daylight, blinking against it. The crowd outside didn't cheer, didn't roar or chant, but they did one thing. They clapped. Not for revenge, for relief. Mrs. Johnson was safe. Bumpy had done what Bumpy always did. He protected Harlem. Inside the boutique, he turned to Mai. He finally really looked at her, the woman he'd nearly lost, standing tall, unshaken. "You sure you're okay?" Bumpy asked quietly. "He didn't touch you?" "I'm sure," Mai said with a small nod. Then a slight grin tugged at her mouth. "I told him," she said. "He made a terrible Bumpy barked out a short, honest laugh. The kind that only comes when tension breaks like thunder after a storm. "I bet you did."
He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, not like a king staking a claim, but like a man who almost lost the only thing that mattered. They just stood there for a while, breathing together, letting the danger dissolve. "You know there's gonna be noise, Bump," Mai whispered into his shoulder. "Questions. Henderson knows better," Bumpy said flatly. "But the story," Mai's voice trailed off. "Anyone with eyes can tell that wound didn't come from a letter opener." Bumpy looked down at her, solemn. "Doesn't matter what they see. Matters what they can prove." He exhaled, tight and controlled. "Henderson's been on the payroll for 15 years. He's not about to grow a conscience today. The cut looks worse than it is, it'll heal. And Morrison," he shrugged, "he'll get to Georgia in one piece, like I promised. What happens there ain't my story. What if he talks? What if he tells someone the truth?" Bumpy smiled slowly. Who's gonna believe a death row inmate with Klan tattoos, especially one claiming a 45-year-old man in dress shoes moved across a room before he could even pull the trigger?
Yeah.
Mai shook her head at that, but she was smiling now too. Quietly, Riley, "One day," she said, "your luck's gonna run out." Bumpy kissed her forehead and replied without hesitation, "Maybe, but not today." The story of what happened in Mai Johnson's dress shop that Monday morning spread like wildfire. In Harlem, it wasn't just remembered, it was retold. Over the decades, it became folklore passed down in barbershops, fish markets, front stoops. Yes, the retellings got wilder over time. In some versions, Bumpy kicked the door clean off its hinges with a single blow. In others, the razor cut was so clean it looked like a surgeon had drawn it. Some said thousands crowded the street. But no matter how the story evolved, one truth held firm. A white man from the Klan came to Harlem thinking power came from skin color and a pistol. He thought black meant weak. That fear could still control Harlem. He didn't understand the rules, didn't know the rhythm. He picked the wrong store, the wrong woman, the wrong city, and he paid for it not with his life, but with something worse: fear, regret, and a scar he'd carry straight to the grave. Because yes, Charlie Morrison was sent back to Georgia on February 12, 1952, his throat stitched at Harlem Hospital. 19 stitches, thin and tight, crossing just below his chin. The wound healed over 6 weeks, but the scar never softened. Thick, ropey tissue he saw every single morning when guards marched him to the showers at Reedsville State Prison. Other death row inmates would ask, "Where'd you get that scar?" He'd lie. "Escape fight. Shattered glass. Guard attacked him." But he never told the truth. Never said, "I pulled a gun on Bumpy Johnson's wife and Bumpy let me live just long enough to die on schedule." Because telling that story made him sound weak, foolish. Telling the truth and admitting that the whole Klan ideology, every rally, every cross burned, every word of superiority, was a lie could save him. On May 15, 1952, at 12:01 a.m., Charlie Morrison was executed in Georgia's electric chair. He was 28. His last meal, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and cornbread. No final words. But on the long walk to the chair, the guards saw him touch his neck over and over, as if trying to remember something. One of them asked, "That scar? From the escape?" Charlie looked at him, smiled, almost sadly. "No. That's from when I learned my lesson. Too bad it came too late."